Library Force Wins. Written and read by D.G. Chichester. "I've never heard of an indoor tornado," Mrs. Milbourne said, hesitantly, unsure whether she should continue this conversation. Marvin Whitmire held his index finger up, spinning it around in a violent circle. "Oh, it's a thing," he explained. "Smaller, naturally, being indoors and all, but in terms of ferocity, just as deadly as their outdoor cousins." The interview was for a part-time replacement to Woman, the checkout desk, while Carol Totzman was on maternity leave. There was no logical reason to keep digging. In spite of herself, the head librarian found herself asking, how is such a thing even possible? "You'd be surprised how many don't even inquire," Marvin said, leaning forward with earnest enthusiasm. "It's a condition of modern HVAC systems. It was a different world when they were first designed, but as climate crisis has increased, the temperate and barometric values have played havoc with atmospheric pressures. As your typical HVAC computer controls try to compensate for the micro fluctuations, there's a buildup in air currents. Subtle, a breeze at first that's prescribed to an open window somewhere. But as that pattern continues, it builds and builds until before you know it, whoosh." Mrs. Milbourne found herself rocking back in her chair in reaction to Marvin's sudden exclamation and exhalation. She could swear she felt her hair blowing back at the same time. "Well, that is very interesting," Mrs. Milbourne agreed. "As to the position, it only pays $8.25 an hour. In truth, the budget would cover $14.95 an hour, but she hoped she could disinterest him with a low salary and end this increasingly absurd conversation before it went any further. "I appreciate the tight budgets of libraries, I do," Marvin said. "It's a damn shame how a central pillar of the community, offering access to all manner of materials for entertainment and learning, is so often given the short shrift in terms of a city's budget. Even so, I'm afraid I couldn't possibly entertain chasing down your tornado for anything less than $22 an hour." "Chasing down our tornado?" Mrs. Milbourne barked a derisive laugh, immediately ashamed of herself for breaking her professional demeanor. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmire. This position is no more, no less than working the checkout desk. If you want to still have a checkout desk, you had better get serious about the danger you're in," Marvin said. "I've been monitoring the breaking point on the air-cooled 4000s installed across the country. That's the exact system you have in this library. I've made it my mission to head off these storms before they can become real, before they pose real danger to your patrons and your collection." Was he threatening her? Was he threatening the people in the library? Mrs. Milbourne glanced around her desk, looking for something to defend herself if this strange man's dangerous talk transformed itself into violent action. "Based on conflicts between similar mechanical systems and external weather conditions, I anticipate this branch could be looking at a category 0.25 on the Fujitsu scale," Marvin said. "I've seen Twister," Mrs. Milbourne admitted. "An F5 tornado in that movie was very terrifying. A 0.25 doesn't sound anywhere near as bad." "You have to adjust for scale," Marvin exclaimed, leaping from his chair. "Inside these walls, a 0.25 could be the equivalent of an F7 tearing up a trailer park in Kansas." Mrs. Milbourne used both hands to heft her American Heritage Dictionary off her desk. She brandished it as a shield and a weapon. "It's time for you to leave, sir," she demanded. The papers on her desk began to move on their own, the edges flitting up and down, dancing as if in a thick summer breeze. "I tried to warn you," Marvin whispered. "They never listen." The librarian dropped the dictionary. It hit the desk hard, holding the papers down, but the rising wind flipped the heavy book open and then began to rise it up into the air. The book began to spin around slowly at first, but picking up speed. Its heavy corners became dangerous whirring blades, tilting and careening on their way to slash apart Mrs. Milbourne's wide-eyed face. Marvin grabbed her by the shoulder and heaved her out of the way of the death-dealing dictionary. The roar of air was like a screaming bear, a howling lion, a screech of primates as the tornado fully took form. People ran for the door. The savage winds crashed bookshelves down to block their way and pummeled them with books that now filled the air, projectiles pounding and paper cutting the library's patrons. $22 an hour, Marvin shouted. "I'm not budgeted above $14.95, Mrs. Milbourne cried. "Increase my hours for the week," Marvin countered. "Done," agreed the head librarian. Marvin slung the backpack off his shoulder and pulled out a device that resembled nothing so much as an oversized hand mixer. A long extension cord followed. He held the blade of the mixer up into the air and tossed the extension cord to Mrs. Milburn. "Plug me in!" As the F.25 did its damnedest to drag her up, as the situation threatened to tear apart her sanity, Mrs. Milburn crouched under the desk, struggling to reach down, down, down toward the outlet below. The plug snapped in, a tiny click that somehow cuts through the howling twist of mad wind. Marvin braced himself, holding onto the mixer with both hands as the blades began their own spin, a pulsating whir that seems as ineffectual as a gnat against a raging rhino. But each time the tornado, now a black mass of wind and pulp paper, shrieks around, the blades take a bite, their clockwise turn eating away at the counterclockwise spin of the indoor madness. Blow, blade, bite. Blow, blade, bite. Blow, blade, bite. The wind dies. The papers flutter to a stop. The American Heritage Dictionary whams back down on the desk, its twisted cover slamming closed. Marvin gives a tug on the power cord and begins to coil it up to return it to his backpack. He smiles the satisfaction of a job well done. "I think you'll agree I'm worth my fee." "Shh," whispers Mrs. Milburn, quiet in the library. Thanks for listening to Library Force Wins, written and read by D.G. Chichester. Copyright 2020 by D.G. Chichester.